coming tonight. Can't hear me?
Not real well.
Hello. That's about as good as I can do. Thank you everyone for coming out for the final event this year in our Archives Month, all month long series of events. This year's theme was desegregation in the minor nation, and this is the third of 3 talks. After this and after asking questions and everything, you can also go out into the main room, and we have 4 different display cases where you can check out materials about both desegregation on our campus and statewide. So now, oh, I forgot. My name is Deborah Griffith. I'm the University Archivist. Now I'm going to introduce Larry Gregg so he can introduce Dr. Harvest Collier.
Thank you all for coming. I'm going to say only a few words because you didn't come here to listen to me. You came here to listen to Dr. Collier. For those of you who do, first I want to thank Debbie, our University Archivist, Katie Seal, and where's Ashley? Ashley Weaver. They're with the State Historical Society of Missouri Research Center, and both those operations are downstairs on the east end of the building. And the man who's in charge of everything, Roger Weaver, thank you. He runs the building. Most of you in the room know Dr. Collier, but some of you may not, so let me give you just a bit of background about Dr. Collier, then I'll get out of the way. A gifted professor of chemistry, Dr. Collier held an array of key academic leadership roles when he was here for 30 years, 1982 to 2012. He was chair of the chemistry department for 1 term. He was an associate dean in the College of Arts and Sciences, and for many, many years the vice provost for graduate studies and undergraduate studies, and then just undergraduate studies. I could spend many, many minutes listing all the successes because of his efforts, but let me use just 2 measures of his success. Everyone who's associated with the university knows that we're always looking at 2 vital numbers. What is the first to second year retention rate of students, and what is the 6-year graduation rate? Under his leadership as vice provost for undergraduate studies, the first to second year retention rate went from 82% when he started to 88%, and at the end of his tenure, and the 6-year graduation rate went from 54% to 61%. Now the rest of my remarks is going to come from something I lifted out of a document I wrote about Dr. Collier shortly before he retired, and I'll try to get through it. Dr. Collier came to a leadership position at S&T through his intelligence and extraordinary work ethic, but also because he always sought to place himself second to the greater good. One had to spend only a few moments with him to understand that he was on a mission. He wanted students, faculty, colleagues, staff, indeed everyone at S&T to be successful. He saw himself as an agent of positive change, and all who interacted with him sensed that immediately. It is still true that we no longer live in an age of heroes, but I have a few. And of my academic heroes, I must tell you, Dr. Collier is at the top of my list. He is the leader I would follow regardless of where he asked me to go, because I trust it would be a destination that will advance the greater good. Dr. Harvest Collier.
Well, friend, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Yes. All right, I'll use my projection classroom voice and be good to go. Almost where to start, and realizing I don't have the rest of the evening, 10 p.m. to have conversation with everyone. But I encourage you, please be engaged with me, and you'll understand a lot more as we proceed. These are indeed reflections, and I'll tell just a brief story. When Dr. Gregg sent me a note and informed me that the university was having this celebration, and he asked if I would consider coming and making a presentation. Well, at the time I was dealing with some health challenges and things like that just kind of took my brain off of everything that I was doing. But as I recovered from that, my dear wife Shirley said, "Hey, Hollis, what? You know that 40 whatever number of Reams paper boxes you got upstairs in the attic? It's a mess. You really need to clean it up." And so in those boxes, because the chemists in the room, biologists, they understand the quantitative nature that we have, and so a lot of things were collected, and I'm not a hoarder. A lot of things were collected and saved, including the letter, acceptance letter that I had written to the department chair in chemistry at the time, that we were coming to Rolla. But I'll tell you more about those things a little bit later. I'd like to say welcome, please. And I'm so pleased you're here. And I know that likely a number of people virtually that are participating. I've invited my family members and friends, especially an alumni group. I'll tell you a little bit more about these folks, not S&T alumni, but my alma mater alumni, Mississippi State University. And so I'll talk about those folks as we have a chance to do that. And so I welcome them and all others. And I encourage everyone, please, if you got questions, write them down, if nothing else. But ask them. Don't be reluctant. And again, you'll understand why I ask you to do that in a little bit. One critical announcement, well, maybe two critical announcements. One of them is that there will be a quiz at the end of this presentation. Seriously. And it would only take you about 3 seconds to respond to the quiz. The second announcement is that at the end of this presentation, there will also be a take-home assignment. I'll explain more about that later. Okay, so let's just see, and maybe I learned it from you, Larry. Don't just stand behind the podium, man. Move around a little bit. And so that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to do that. Yes, and I don't intend for you to read these. Not at all. If you want to, that's fine. But what I would like for you to do is, focus on the things that we're sharing, and I think that will be pretty important to do. Here's a critical question. What in the world possessed me to come and stand before you this evening to have this discussion? And why is that kind of question important anyway for me to ask? Well, if somebody asks you, hey, would you mind coming and talking about working 30 years in the place and all of the things that you experienced and you want to openly share with your audience when, we're private people. We don't get up and talk about things to people all the time, hardly ever. Now, if it's chemistry, we'll talk all day long about that stuff. But the point is, it was a critical question to consider. And so you know the answer to that consideration at this point. And I make this note particularly that the challenges that I had personally with doing this, and you're going to get a sense of the seriousness of the presentation by this first statement. I had personal anguish, guys, doing this. But at the same time, a sense of decent accomplishment as a result. Now, how can you have personal anguish in remembering working in an environment for, actually it turned out to be 36 years. My friend and colleague, Tyrone Davidson, isn't here tonight, but he helped me with this. If we get a chance, I'll tell you a little bit about that. But the presentation is kind of a lifetime presentation, or at least a third of it, and the time we were talking about here. And so those challenges, those personal challenges, you'll get some senses of what that means in just a little bit. And then I had a dear family member ask me, so what's your logic for accepting that invitation? And I started to, well, I thought this and I thought that, and she didn't say anything else. And so I said, I probably should write this down. And I share with Larry, well, you know, because I got that question, I thought I probably ought to write this down. I'm going to share that with you as well. Now, I love to talk about these folks. I attended and got my degrees at Mississippi State University. Started at that institution in 1968. At the time, there were 77 black students at an institution with a population of 10,000 students. And long story much shorter, we found each other. And we've started meeting on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, tonight is our regular monthly meeting. But I think likely they are all tuned in. So we'll, if time allows, we'll talk about them a little bit more. The thing from them was, because we chatted just briefly about this opportunity. And I said to them, I've got some personal concerns about doing this. What do y'all think? One person spoke up, well, many made comments, but one poor person spoke up and he said, okay, Miguel, I hope you're listening. Collier, you got to tell your story. And you know why. And hearing that, I go, oh, okay. And then the thing that touched me more than anything else, students asking questions. Because even as an alumnus of Mississippi State University, we've had opportunity to be re-engaged with the university and interact with students. And students would ask about, because we're introduced to them and say, well, these are among the first students that attended the university, and they want to share things with you. And we start sharing, and they will say, well, what was that like? And we'd ask more quantitative questions. What was what like? Like going to class, going across campus, going to cafeteria. Where did you study? How did you study? Did you have resources, courses, and things like that? You know, those kinds of questions. We're asking, well, what's that like? What wisdom can you share? It was always the question. What would you tell us that we need to do so that we can be as successful as you were? And some inevitably would ask this question. Why don't we know about that? And there are reasons, of course, that could be related. Let's see what we have next. Oh yeah, I'm glad you did that. All right. Here begins your preparation to respond to the questions. Ready? What has shaped or is shaping how you engage with your environment every day? Serious question. What shapes how you engaged or how you become engaged? You ever consider that question? Anybody ever ask you that question? Now you've been asked the question. And I ask it very seriously. It's something, it isn't a loaded question. It's not intended to be a loaded question, let's just say. Okay? What shapes your daily engagement with your environment, with the world? And perhaps another way of asking it, what's your world view? Anybody ever ask you that? Are you able to stand up and tell them right away, very definitively? Here's my world view. That's what I do about it. And so let's try to get to the meat of the matter before I run out of time and the hook comes out and drags me over. How did we wind up do we wind up, how do we take this path? What path do we take? How do we wound up being here? I think it's an important thing to understand because it allows you to appreciate the reflections that I have. Okay. And actually, then you can reflect with me. Those of you that are in the room and know me will go, all right, I'm just cueing you, that's all. What I want you to note, and I'll just mention this because I can't talk about all of this, but note, this idea came from my intention 12, 14 years ago. You know, if I ever stop working, I'm going to sit down and write about all these experiences that I've had. And actually, I've done this several times, at least 5. Well, why don't you just write the title of the chapters and kind of start with that? Because I remember we had a visiting Pulitzer Prize winner come to campus to speak to freshman students once. And I asked him, so how'd you start writing? Or how should one start writing if they desire to write? He says, just start writing. And then he proceeded to explain what that meant. You sit down and you write. It doesn't have to necessarily be in definitive order, beginning to end. Here's the first chapter and the introduction, and here's the last chapter and the ending conclusion. You don't have to do that. Just write. And so this kind of reflects this. But more importantly, is for you to perhaps pay attention to the dates. 1950 in Starkville, Mississippi. And so let me use just that statement to begin to tune you in as to where we're going. Okay? 1950. Anybody before 1950 in the room? This is a birth year. Yes, sir. Amen. Okay. Then 1968 is when I started university at Mississippi State. Now, if you know the Southeastern Conference, you know that Mississippi State is located in Starkville. Right? And I'll say more as time permits about this, but I just want you to kind of follow me as we're doing what we're doing here. Okay? And then after university, I took a job at the Dow Chemical Company as a research person. And then subsequently coming to Rolla, and then now we reside in Collierville. But where else? Right? There's something I need to set with this. It's really important that you have an appreciation of. There are lots of details, but there needs to be a context. Okay? All right. Here goes. Okay. Never mind that for a second because I need to give you the context. There was a period in America, roughly from the 1880s to the mid-1960s, characterized by state and local laws that enforced racial segregation and discrimination against African Americans. These laws, known as Jim Crow, thank you, Jim Crow laws, mandated the separation of people in all aspects of public and private life, including schools, hospitals, transportation, and it limited African Americans' political and social rights. The era ended, or at least its end was prompted by the passage of a couple of landmark laws, federal legislation. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I was born in 1950. This is 1965. How old am I? 15. Have I been made already by age 15? You get my drift? Yeah. Okay. So, you grow up in a culture where this is our society and the way it operates. Now, I know I don't have time to explain to you, well, how do we manage that? Now, as a black kid in Starkville, Mississippi, by the way, I need to add this tag so that you have an appreciation that, yeah, Collier, you lived in the South and you grew up in Starkville, Mississippi, and you went to the university. You must have had a silver spoon in your mouth. No. Starkville had a corner, in its southeast corner of the city was a little segregated community called Needmore. I'm not kidding. Needmore. And so you can use any imagination you want, but yeah, we were poor. Sitting right adjacent to a university, by the way, in which I never set foot on campus until I was 18 years old. I could tell you more, but we'll go on. And so with this, there's a significant caveat that we should all be aware of. And I say that we all should be aware of, more than one meaning. De facto Jim Crow. Get my drift? De facto Jim Crow. If you don't, bluntly, all those practices that folks were doing for some 80 years, which was presumably some improvement from the previous 80 years or longer, folks didn't stop practicing just because some law said you're supposed to. And so you grow up with a mindset, an understanding, and a pathfinding ability that you get from living in our dear US of A to do what you do. Okay? And so, what I'd like to have you do to prepare for your quiz and your take-home exam is to be engaged with me now. Right? And if nothing else, use your imagination. And I'm going to share some things with you that represent lived experiences. And all I ask is, if you imagine yourself living through this experience or that experience, would you find it acceptable? That would be the crux of the matter. And I should add, I'm talking about the things that didn't happen in Mississippi. We eventually moved to Midland, Michigan, but I'll have to tell you about that. That's another chapter. We'll get to that. But I'm talking about the experiences here in Rolla, Missouri. And primarily on this campus. So here we go. Imagine, and tell me, is it acceptable? Better still tell yourself. To have an open denial of your historical existence by minimizing, ignoring, whitewashing your lived experience. Is that acceptable? If you were faced with that, how would you navigate it? What would you do about it? Is it acceptable for others to pretend or believe you are either invisible or you represent a threat as a person of color in the presence of the majority when you are neither? You're not invisible and you're not a threat. That happens more frequently than you could ever imagine. We don't have time to talk about that. Somebody asked me, are you going to give them the good, the bad, and the ugly? And I'll say, well, I'll do as much as I can in the time that I have allotted. So this does happen in this environment. It truly does. Unacceptable, is it, to be on the receiving end of fear and intimidation tactics for no legitimate reason. For example, my nameplate on my office door, I come to work early one morning, and you don't pay attention to those things. You just, you come in and you unlock your door and you go in and you get busy. Well, I go to class. I went to class, but I had an 8 o'clock class. I came back, unlocked my door, walk in. Nameplate gone. What do you think I thought? You can hold that thought, but what do you think I thought? Oh, that's such an unusual name. Somebody just really wanted to have your nameplate, so it's okay. So I asked the department chair, hey, my nameplate's missing. You mind? Yeah, we'll get another one for you. Now, the first one just had 2 glue spots on the back, and so it could be easily pried off if somebody really wants. This time, it was glued with epoxy. And it was taken down again. The third time, it was glued and screwed. And stayed up. Finding a hangman's noose hanging over the front door of your house. What's happening in Rolla? And so imagine it. To me, that's just totally unacceptable. Everything I'm going to share with you about this is unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. Or having the N-word hurled at you while you're beating on the side of your pickup truck. When I'm leaving work on a Wednesday evening, I know it was a Wednesday because I teach class at 6 o'clock and it was dark. I walked out in front of the chemistry building and down the sidewalk in front of the chancellor's residence. And by the time I got there, this thundering sound, somebody yelling and telling me to go home. Well, maybe 3 Wednesdays later, it happened again. And I'm going like, all right, well, some of you may know that me and my family, we practiced martial arts for a very long time. And so the course of action, let's just say, would be to go grab that young person out of that truck and painfully let them know that their behavior was inappropriate. That's one solution. The other solution was this, and it is the one that I opted for. Rather than going out the front door and going past the chancellor's residence, went out the back door and went past the chancellor's residence in the back, so I could walk across the street to the parking lot and get in my car and go home. Problem solved, right? He said. Someone on campus, I didn't know who the person was. A man walked up to me and says, "Are you still here? I figured you'd be gone by now." Is that acceptable? You know, what do you do about that? Receiving an email. This is really stunning to me, but nonetheless, happened. Receiving an email from a faculty member suggesting to me that slavery was, in this country, was beneficial. True. And I approached the department chair about it, and I can't remember anything being done. I never received another email like that, however. While I was walking, actually, it happened in front of Parker Hall. I was walking across campus. Man walks up to me and he says, "You shouldn't be in an administrative position. You moving up too fast." true. Or, this is a classic. DWB.
Driving while black.
Driving while black. Now there is at least one colleague in the room that was actually in the vehicle when that happened. And actually the vehicle was, we had like 4 people when we went up to the UNC St. Louis campus to visit with folks in the education department because we wanted to gain insight about how we could bolster our teacher education program here on campus. I was driving. My dear friend Larry Gripe was riding in the passenger seat, and there were 2 or 3 people on the back seat. It's a minivan. And the officer said, "You ran that light." Now, why would I run a red light with a van full of folk? And what y'all don't know, Larry, you probably saved me from being forced to get out of the car and assume the position. That enough of that one, but it's common occurrence. I don't know, Eddie, I don't know if you've been in the car when we were going somewhere. No, you weren't, because I would be hearing it right now. Here's my pet peeve, and it's important. It is unacceptable, totally, to limit students, including students of color, every opportunity to learn, pursue, and achieve their educational goals. It's just insane to me. Maybe my mindset, but and all because we don't provide the reasonable resources that they need. We don't even take the time to realize how they need and can utilize those resources. We don't do that. As a matter of fact, as we're doing today and recently, we're pushing back on all of that. Y'all heard of the DEI pushback? So, I'll rush. This is classic. It's really unacceptable to live in a nation whose laws say that we are all equal, but we're not all treated equally. Never have been. At least in my 3/4 of a century living. I don't get it. Well, I do get it, but it's not enough time now to have you get it like I get it. I get it. Here's something that bothers me greatly. Talk about DEI pushback. Resources that can be provided our students today, and they are denied those resources in subtle kinds of ways. I have, like faculty on other campuses in the country, sometimes we'll have a little powwow and I say, well, what's up? And they talk about these kinds of things where students aren't encouraged to embrace resources. They aren't provided the resources. And I get it from the students directly. I hear what you're telling me, but I wish I had known. Why should it be that a student has to say, as a result of something that didn't happen, and they failed just because they didn't know? I had one student tell me, he said, you know what I just heard you guys say in the last 30 minutes is the kind of wisdom I so dearly need. Wisdom and mentoring firsthand from a seasoned resource, he said, is priceless. I asked him, so tell me what you mean. And so he proceeded. In very simple terms, he was saying, what I'm hearing y'all say is very encouraging. Why don't we say it to our students so they can get what they really need as a result? And I remember hearing this, but I guess it didn't really matter. You know, if you're a tenure track professor on this campus, mentoring students doesn't necessarily get you tenure. Sorry, makes you tender. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily make tenure for you. So what's up with that? Another rhetorical question, I suppose. It is unacceptable to presume in thoughts and actions to be incapable of making credible professional contributions. You're already judged before you even start. You're not even given the opportunity, the open-mindedness enough to recognize that here's someone that can contribute to the welfare of the institution as well as to the success of our students. And then finally, I'll quit this. For an institution to deny or abandon, let's just say, for an institution to abandon strategies that they know work that contribute to the success of students. And particularly if there were programs that were geared toward addressing the needs of students of color, but all of that's abandoned. Almost to the sense that you would predict that there may be fewer students of color on this campus if we keep going in the desired way that we want to. And so that bugs me. That's hard for me. So, what are you thinking? Would be one question.
Harvest, you know me, I have a question.
Okay.
So I remember us talking years ago about you fighting your way out of the neighborhood, is what I remember. But one of the things, and we shared, since we're both from bottom feeder states, so to speak, I want to hear from you, which I don't know, what encouraged you? Because I sat here thinking when you were talking, because there's a lot of crap that gets piled on us. No, you can't do that. You can't do it. I was once told you can't be promoted because you're a woman and you don't support a family. When I first went out to work after college. And so, not to compare it at all to what you had to deal with, but what were there some significant people that encouraged you along the way or told you? Because I can think of several who pointed the direction that I didn't even know the direction existed.
No, I understand your question. If you don't mind, if I might paraphrase.
You go ahead.
Okay. Hey, Collier, did you have a mentor?
Or mentors.
Yeah. Did anyone come knock on your door and say, hey, Collier, what do you need? Actually, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more if we have time. Answer? No. Gradually. Right? And there's some psychology for that, but nonetheless. Well, let me help you just a wee bit, okay? Because Shirley and I encounter this. It's a part of living, all right, daily, unfortunately. And we talk about this because people would say, well, I thought you guys were the most successful, no problems, y'all just lived a life of joy and achievement and had nothing to worry about. Until I got to know y'all. And then I realized something that I wasn't aware of. And you'd ask, so why is this happening? Well, why is it not happening to me as well? Answer. it doesn't affect you. Now, admittedly, you can offer some other insights and responses about this, but basically that's the thing that we've observed. If you were impacted the same way we are, I guarantee you, you'd be saying the same thing I'm saying. Now, what we've just shared, you should remember. Quiz question and take home assignment. Remember? Right. I want you to remember that. Okay. So, now consider all of these lived experiences and the things I've tried, the images I've tried to give you, the explanations I've sought to offer. Take all of that, and you make a commitment to come to a community like this one, and you want to pursue a professional career here. I know you may have lots of them. Why aren't you going to do something like that in a place like this? So what led us to Rolla? That's hopefully answers this question. Now, I've got Mississippi State University captured there, right at the top. And so I'm just going to make one statement about that so you have an understanding and appreciation of this. I had mentioned to you before the alumni colleagues that we've regathered and we're starting to meet and exchange. Well, long story, much shorter. We got together and decided, hey, let's participate in creating a documentary of our experiences as students, undergraduate students particularly, at Mississippi State University. And we did that. Last word I got last Thursday is that documentary is pretty much ready to go, and it's going to account for how these young folks at the time, what led them to come to MSU? More importantly, how did they navigate that environment to complete their degrees? Now, present day students want to know that. They want to know every detail about, well, what did you do when you had a professor that didn't like you? This is a common question, right? How'd you manage that? Where'd you find your resources? Those kinds of things you wind up getting. Well, that documentary, I think, and I've been told that it's going to be fantastic. The television department at MSU is really good. They have Emmy Award-winning productions. So, who knows? Well, from Mississippi State, there's a story there. To Dow Chemical, there's a story there too. Okay? But long story, much shorter, I wound up going there after completing a PhD in chemistry at MSU and working in their new chemical products division, a brand new division aimed at discovering brand new products that potentially had market value. And so you went in there and you wanted to do those kinds of things. Well, to me, it was like a glorified postdoc because you got to go in there and do almost anything you wanted. Any idea you had, they were paying you for your ideas anyway. Any idea you had, you could pursue it and develop things and all kinds of things. Well, part of that is one of the responsibilities we had taken on in this new technology, new product seeking kind of activity was to pick universities in the country, all of the high-powered research ones. Dow's an international company, so you kind of got resources that you can go and do things like this. And so in this group, we decided, okay, let's target some universities, see what they're doing, contact them, and if they're doing things that we're interested in pursuing maybe with them in a collaborative kind of way, let's join up with them and get some agreements and let's get the company rolling on these new ideas coming from folks that are in that lab grinding away at the cutting edge things to help us get along. Well, one day, while at work, my phone rings in my office. Phone rings. Hello. is this Dr. Collier? What? Yeah? What? And my name is Dean Marvin Barker. I'm at the he says I'm at UMR, University of Missouri-Rolla. And to show you how uninitiated I was, I says, oh, good old Mizzou. That's what I said. And he didn't respond to that. He just says, yeah, I've got your contact information, and I wanted to learn if you had an interest in the University of Missouri-Rolla. And I said, oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, we've been working on getting technology, because he explained that it's an engineering school, lots of research going on. And blah, blah, blah. I said, perfect. Yes, very interested. We've been trying to hook up with institutions and find out what they're doing and get collaborative relationships going and get going. He says, oh, good. That's great. And I'm saying, oh, okay, that was easy. Because some of the other institutions I've contacted, no, I don't think we're interested in doing that kind of thing right now. For about 30 minutes, we chatted. When can you come? Was his question. Wait, I usually organize this part of it, right? And so it turns out that we were using the same words, but they were very different meanings. And so, a year and a half, 2 years later, I wound up here. How about that? Correct words, but wrong interpretations, I suppose. And then here at a university is where we wound up. If I can see the next one. We'll try to move it. Upon my arrival in the fall of 1982, what was my impression of UMR at the time and the Rolla community? And I must add, my wife Shirley has her own lived experiences about all of this. Okay? If I caused your ears to tingle a little bit, guess what? Okay. What I found, strong research focus and really sharp students. I was really impressed by that. You know, coming from 24/7, working a lot, doing research for 5 years at Dow Chemical, you understood the research process very well, and eagerness and engaging. I'm thinking graduate students, right, involved in research would be a cool thing. I did recognize the student diversity challenge, however, because I would ask questions about that, and I didn't get quite logical answers, except, you mean MEP? And I said, what's MEP? Later, we'll talk about that. I found a lack of collegiality, seriously. You know, the department chair was good, and the other folks that were serving as chairs, they were pretty good. You know, they come, how you doing? Good. What do you need? Vincent Roach, Oliver Emanuel. Yeah, I know he's old, long time ago. But nobody showed up giving me a big hug and says, welcome, and can I show you the ropes? No, none of that. And then there was the workload. Very significant, as far as I was concerned. Now, I was very keen on the research part, but the teaching part, you know, other than the teaching courses as a graduate student, that was pretty much the extent of it, right? And so you have to discover something about that. It turned out to be a wonderful discovery for me, if I don't get to talk about it anymore, that this was a huge, strong magnet for me, is to participate with students and help motivate them to learn. That was cool stuff. Teaching, research, service, other, you know, they even sought to have me have a dual appointment in the Dean of Students' office. And I said, no. He says, well, you really should. I said, no. No, you really should, because we need you to know. And finally they relented and says, oh, okay, well, we'll give you a chance to get started. But there was no research program startup funding. Oh, I take that back. The department chair brought me a brand new vacuum pump. It was a nice pump. It really was. And so coming to Rolla, we met some wonderful people right at first, other than the department chair. Samir Hanna. Does that ring a bell with any? Okay. And Samir Hanna, very, very nice man, very nice, and enjoyed visiting with him. Wilbur Tapmeyer. Wilbur Tapmeyer? Wilbur Tapmeyer. A wonderful soul. I'll share just a little bit. But, Salem Avenue Baptist Church, even before we moved from Midland, Michigan, we had already established contact. And all we need to do is show up, embraced in a bear hug. And that was very helpful. Lawrence and Catherine George.
Yes.
You know, Lawrence was one of the very first people we met. And I recall us going to lunch and him saying, okay, Colliers, I'm going to give you the skinny. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is the way it is. And Floyd Harris.
Yes.
I don't know if we recognize, and you will, it will be very obvious to you if I get to say all that I want to say, the role he played. You know, y'all know the parable of the mustard seed? Right? You can Google it later if you want. But I consider him to be the mustard seed in many regards. That's our youngest son, Donovan. That's me, bent over. I think our oldest son took a picture. But Wilbur and Troy Hicks in the math. Those two guys says, hey, Collier, do you fish? Well, yeah. Do you trout fish? I said, yeah. Yeah, we trout fish in Michigan. But if you know anything about fishing, and trout fishing particularly, and like in Michigan with steelhead trout, you use a still leader on the end of a 50-pound test fishing line. And I had plenty of that equipment. You know, big old spinners and that sort of thing. He says, well, that might be good for cutthroat and steelhead trout. But down here, you got to use 2-pound test line, and that's it. I said, well, he says, never mind, I'll show you. And so it started a wonderful habit. Me and my two sons, and eventually my daughter, sometimes Shirley would come. She has those stories to tell about that. But to me, that was just great. And we lived 20 minutes from Merrimack Springs Park. And so Wilbur taught me, hey, you don't have to rush into work. Let's go fish first. We'd go, whistle sounds, you fish. 20 minutes later, you're cleaning. And he says, well, you don't have to stop at the house. We got a fridge in the department. You just stick them in there. Did you get ready to go home? And so that was wonderful. That's a wonderful memory for us because it created a good long time. All right, I'm going to try to go fast. I mentioned Dow Chemical, right? And Dean Barker contacting me, and eventually us winding up here. In terms of professional roles, these are the things I wound up doing. And Larry mentioned them. And so you go through the ladder and you do things. You might notice this, and I don't know if you can see it, but having to serve as department chair, you notice the asterisk, the two of them there, and then you notice down here where it says things start to get out of control. Yeah, notice I got two asterisks. That was supposed to be a one-year deal. It wasn't. And then, apparently, the dean, John Fulton, approached the department and says, "Hey, Collier, I need your help. You know, the College of Arts and Sciences really need your help." I said, "Why?" He says, he starts to list all of these things. And so, oh, okay, I think. And so we started doing those things. You notice there's an additional asterisk on that one, right? Things got out of control. Then one day, the dean comes to me. I'm working over in nuclear engineering. It used to be nuclear engineering. Is that Fulton? Yeah, Fulton. I'm in there just working away, and the dean walks in and he says, "You got a minute?" Yeah. He says, "Chancellor Thomas wants to visit with you," is what he said. I said, "Why?" He said, "You need to go over right now and talk to him, and you'll find out." Well, you know, at the time, the university was really concerned about student enrollment. It was. And so recruitment and retention and student success was seen as the primary way the university could grab the bull by the horns and see if we could right this ship. That analogy didn't fit so much. But nonetheless, that's where we were headed. And so I went in and I sat down, and Chancellor Thomas was sitting at his desk, and he was just writing and writing. And he looks up and says, if any of you knew him, he wasn't. He didn't have belly laughs. I've never seen him. So, unless he did after I walked out. But he said, "Collier, I have some confidence in you." What? I had no clue. He says, you know we have a problem with student retention, and we really need to get at that problem, because the competition for recruiting students is very critical and serious and high. And so one of the major ways that we can address that is to keep the students we have and help them complete their degrees. Do you agree? Is what he asked. And I said, "Sure, yeah, I agree." And he said, "Good. You're hired." And I go, And so you're hiring me. What's my job? He says, retention. Any questions? Where do I start? You have any insight that you might offer me about retention and those kinds of things that you've mentioned already? He said, "No. That's why I hired you. See ya." And so okay. He says, "Go see the provost." Y.T. Shaw was provost. Go see the provost. And so I walk down the hall to the provost's office and says, "Chancellor says I need to see you." He says, "Who are you?" And then he started laughing. I mean, he knew I was. I didn't know him. I just walked in and says, "I need to see him." And so, shorter story. That's how I wound up in these roles. Sometimes I say to people, they just fell in my lap. No, it's more like they just fell on my head in many regards. But amazingly so, this is the source of my sense of appreciation of having made positive contributions to the welfare of the institution and to the success of our students. We learned a lot, and I know I need to move on, and so let me try to do just that, please. Okay. Here's the focus. Student success, student retention, continual improvement in the learning environment and the learning outcomes of our students, and diverse student success. I was really passionate about that part. And I alluded to this before. I had a very nice connection with research, but I discovered my real passion for engagement with students and contributing to their success really might be SPY. And I discovered that like in the mid-1990s. It just dawned on me. In part, you feel this level of confidence when students are lining up at your office door wanting to have a little help with chemistry. But more often, can I talk to you about something? And so that started that, please. And so what I wanted to chime through these things, and I'll just rapidly go to the part that hopefully really counts. But as a new faculty member, just to kind of talk about the things I found passion about, and here's an example of that. General chemistry, and I'm assuming it's pretty much the same thing, is kind of we don't like to use this term anymore, but the gatekeeper course for beginning students when they come to a campus like this one to take general chemistry. Still is? Okay. I didn't think it had changed, because that's the way it was for me in 1968. Taking general chemistry. And so, how do we address that? How do we get to the point of helping students learn to achieve in a course that tends to have students stumble when they first start? There are lots of things that we can say about students that are attracted to come to this institution. Nonetheless, how do we help them? And so I'm so pleased I was part of the group of folks that taught general chemistry. Previously, all of the faculty just did their own thing. We used the same textbook, maybe, but we taught general chemistry. We got to the point where everybody is using the same textbook. Everyone is coordinating the delivery of the content of their courses. Wow. And we meet weekly to talk about how we're doing and how our students are doing. And then, clickers. I understand we're still using the personal response devices on campus. Top Hat is the latest version that's coming. I guess spring, they're going to do a pilot. And then, versatile course content delivery. We were jokingly calling it, here's a smorgasbord of how you might earn credit in general chemistry. Here's some practices and some techniques for doing that. Remote learning, for example. And so we study that. I had graduate students that, that stuff, because he worked with me as a TA, and I had him on appointment, and he got so interested in this. Rather than being in a wet chem lab and doing stuff, can I do this? and earn a PhD? And I said, well, I had some limited experience of doing some out-of-the-box things with students studying at the graduate level. Let's just see. No one had done it before. Travis McDowell, I don't know if you meet Travis. Okay. Anyway, Travis took it on, and he was quite successful at doing it. He had a wonderful team of faculty that served on this committee that was very supportive, and they did it. It is one of the most cited publications that I've ever seen in my own experiences with research. Because it came right at the time when COVID, we were already doing that stuff with this course. So that general chemistry program is special to me in that regard. And as department chair, we just focused on, we simply focused on those things we knew that needed to be addressed critically. Continual improvement. A research focus, for example. That was, particularly for undergraduate students, were the things that, and for the department, recruiting students, new student recruitment. I wound up getting on the road and traveling in the region and saying to folks, well, we got a chemistry. Do you have chemistry? I thought you were in engineering school. Well, we are that too. But we have degrees in chemistry. I remember the time I said to him, Dad, we even have a history degree. He says, you're kidding me. I said, no. He says, really? I says, yeah. I was doing not only with department chair responsibilities, but even with the dean and those activities. And so visiting prospective students, talking about all the degree programs in the College of Arts and Sciences, that was pretty cool stuff. And so, although things were out of hand, we started to manage. I couldn't find a whole lot of photos, but these are images, photos of former graduate students. And they were just wonderful. Plain old wonderful. Very accomplished. Very intelligent. To be doing this administrative stuff, and then, I think at one time we had about 8 or 10 graduate students in the group. And so we worked a lot. And so I knew I would be able to do that, and that was cool. And one of my former graduate students is in the room, and he's probably musing over his photos. Particularly rewarding is that working with graduate students, certainly, but even with undergraduate students, you discover that these folks become, I know y'all know this, they become lifelong friends, even family members. They wind up either adopting us or we adopting them. And so when holidays roll around, you can expect phone calls and text messages and all kinds of things. This is also true with undergraduate students in terms of research and stuff. I have to say this briefly, because to me it's really important, and you will be able to follow this, because then on a Friday afternoon in April every year, and the physics department started doing this first, and they'd have 1 or 2 students, and I learned about it, and I says, well, what do you, because they asked me, would you come over and listen to one of our students talk about their research, undergraduate students, talk about their research? Oh, sure, I'd love to do that. Experienced that one time, and I says, I got students that do research, that can read and join, and yeah. And so for a couple of years, there were 4 or 5, and we'd spend an hour. It usually didn't take much longer than that. The students would prepare a presentation or a poster or something, and then they would get up and explain what they were doing. Now, what's happened? We called it eventually experiential learning. Mm-hmm. And so the whole campus participates. We even have an undergraduate research. It's not a week yet, is it? I'm sorry. I know it's just a day. But to spend maybe 1 or 2 hours on a Friday afternoon in April, to spend a whole day with every student potentially participating in a conference like this is nice. very nice to see it. And so, let's see if we can get through this. I have to talk about this because it was one of my pet peeves before, you might recall. Getting students to come to campus. Y'all remember Jay Goff? I remember Jay Goff. Jay, I think, contributed significantly to this institution understanding what it needed to do to attract students to the institution, and with the collaboration and teams that we organized about trying to do this and help students be successful, we did stuff. I'll give you examples of that just briefly. Rolla is not a piece of cake for most students when they come here. We even complain about students not being adequately prepared to come to an institution like this and meet all of the expectations, especially like how they perhaps did in high school as students, right? And so the summer transition was really important. It was especially important for Black students, Hispanic students, Native American students. They were all involved in participating in this. And MEP, the Minority Engineering Program, was when I first became aware of what was going on. And I met Floyd Harris, shook his hand. I'm the MEP director. Glad you're here at UMR. Here's what we do. Okay, sounds neat, sounds cool. And so that evolved our relationship. And it got to the point where Dr. Tabmeyer was in their summer program. They put students through 7 weeks study of chemistry, math, English, and that's it. That's what we're doing initially. And Dr. Tabmeyer was teaching the chemistry component, but then he came to my office one day and he says, "Hey, Harvest, you think you might have an interest in doing the chemistry part this summer?" I said, "Well, what do you do?" So he explained what he did. I said, "Okay, that should be easy." "Oh, sure. And how long do I have to do it?" Because if you got a full load of regular semester in summertime, that's when you do research. He said 7 weeks. And so for 7 weeks in the summer, for years, until 2003, I would prepare to deliver 7 weeks of general chemistry to the incoming minority engineering students. And that was great. But then because those students were so successful, we took the hint. Well, that works for minority students, this should work for all students. Well, yeah. And so, hey, Collier, since you got this responsibility as Vice Provost for Undergraduate Studies, and they told you, you got to retain all our students and make sure they complete their degrees, and let's do this for all the other students. Okay, what do you want me to do? Hit the ground running is what you want to have happen. And so that's where HGR come from, if you didn't know that. And so I was having a prep for general chemistry because I was so motivated by that. And I was telling the students that, guys, you come and you study with me, I'm going to help you be prepared to take the whole course because I'm going to give it to you in 7 weeks, and you're going to know it. And we proved ourselves right in doing that. And because they were successful in their first semester of general chemistry, everybody else kind of recognized the freshman engineering program, and the folks that coordinated that, they said, "Hey, Collier, what are you doing in that? Why don't you try it one time?" And so I was preparing 2 separate study sessions for general chemistry. Did MEP, and then here comes HGR. I did it twice, and then I asked, "Can we merge these?" "Yeah, but you can't do it 7 weeks because our students are not going on it. Most students are on it." And I started telling them, well, you know, the students that do it for 7 weeks, they love it so much, they don't even want to go home for the break before the regular semester starts. And no, we were convinced to do it 4 weeks. Fine. But some marvelous things happen in working with those students, particularly with the MEP students before. I talked about clickers and using those response devices for students to be actively engaged, not just sitting there taking notes and going, what is he talking about? Find ways to engage them so they know what you're talking about and they can demonstrate to you what you're talking about and that they understand it. So we start using clickers in the summer, first time, with students. And I prepared material for the clicker style learning. We got through it, and maybe the first 3 weeks or so, and I told them, I've run out of clicker stuff. I'm going to go back to writing on the wall. They said, hey, Dr. C, we need to talk to you. We don't want to do that anymore. We don't want you to do that anymore. We want clicker stuff. And so I proceeded to prepare the rest of the material for the course that I intended to deliver. Clicker stuff. They excelled at it. Now the campus got a hint of that. Oh, we gave them a hint of that. And I remember over in G3 Shrink Hall, the big lecture hall over there, inviting the campus to come and see the result of our first semester of using clickers in an official general chemistry class. Now they had these little old button type clickers, and we only had a limited number of them, and so all that we had, maybe about 150 or so, all that we had, we would, before the students arrived for class, we'd take and place one in each seat. We do the lecture, we'd have them do all the clicking, and then ask the students, leave them in your seat. We'll pick them up. Okay? Some did, but we managed. From that, you're using Top Hat now, as I understand. So you can see how that works. Okay. Then, I've mentioned MEP, but as a result of MEP, because one of the things that Mr. Harris did was weekly, he would meet with the MEP students. And he'd take their pulses. What do you need? What's happening? What's going on? Served as a mentor, significantly. And created something that the university had not done before. I think Dr. Grecki kind of alluded to long ago, someone from the NAACP saying, if you had someone that could serve as a mentor, understand the perspectives of these students and what their needs are, and give them insight about meeting their needs, they will be successful. Well, so I started doing this, and you know, it's a wonderful model for us to start doing it as well. And so I started. He says, "Well, he started inviting me. Well, can you come to the session that we have in the evenings, and just tell them what you know about stuff." And that evolved to where I was doing it, and I'm inviting Floyd to come to the class to give students some insight. Hey, what's going on? Come and let them know and visit the class, things like that. And it grew. I'll show you a little bit. It grew because the number of students that were enrolling in the course grew. And it became a formalized thing. They even said, well, we're coming here each week and we're listening and we know it's valuable for us, but we got a question. Can we get credit for this? I said, sure. Well, I didn't know at the time. I said, let me ask. So I asked the department chair, hey, there's no course. There's no registered course for what we're doing. He said, well, what are you doing? And I explained it to him. And he says, because I asked him, can you give me a course number? And I convinced him, sure, I'll get you a course number. Go see the registrar. That's what I did. We got a course number. And so it built from there. All right, all of this stuff, and I don't intend for you to read this, but what I do intend is that you have some sense of recognizing what all that is. This is a representation of all of that effort that I started describing to you, all of the people that were involved in helping students be successful on this campus. And these are things. And in terms of change and growth that this institution hadn't experienced before relative to student success happened here. And the idea that a division now of undergraduate studies, Larry mentioned undergraduate and graduate studies is the way it started. It wore me to a frazzle. And so I told the provost, I can't do both. He says, well, which one do you want? I want the one undergraduates. That's what I said. He said, you got it. And so as a result of that, we wound up doing all this stuff. And so there are stories behind every last one of them. It gives you a sense of how the things we achieved were actually achieved. Here's a representation of that. Again, partner with Jay Goff and his folks, recruiting students and going out to conferences and learning from others and having others learn from us and sharing secrets of how they help students be successful. I started doing this in early 2001, when I started at Vice Provost stuff. And so moving from low 80s, 82, 83% to 88% in a reasonably short time. This was 08, 09 when we were looking at 88%. And what had started is that Chancellor Carney was our chancellor at that point, Jack Carney.
Yes.
He says, I really need to have you deans and vice provosts and stuff. I need y'all to talk to the campus, tell them what you're doing. So he started having these monthly sessions where the deans would show up and they strut their stuff about all the stuff we were doing, or they were doing. And then when my time came up, I was the last one the time we announced this. So I started talking, here's what we're doing, here's some summary of this and this and this and this. And we've been doing that and that and that. And Dr. Kearney said, well, that's good. And I said, well, lastly, I need to report that we have an 88% all-time high record of first-year retention of our beginning students. And he kind of sat back and then he said, Harvest, he's from Boston. Right? He said, Harvest, that's pretty good. He said, make it 90%. That's all he said. Make it 90%. And so I want, and Tyrone was like, master student, this is my very special piece. Again, I give Florida Harris credit for it. Establishing that MEP model and the idea that you can mentor students and not just a few students, but you can mentor a lot of students. And it's not that difficult. And it's very impactful. That to me is really important. It attracted 85% of the first year and transfer minority students that came to Missouri S&T. They registered for the course. And we emphasize academic success over almost anything else. But we also focused on personal development and professional development. All three. We tried to balance them and to help students have an appreciation of how that is. And we got to a 95% first year retention. Now, I must give credit to where credit is due because my dearest friend and buddy and colleague and partner in crime, well, at least illegal things, or at least not blasphemies. Tyrone Davidson. When we left Rolla Community, there was still a desire to offer this experience for students, to focus on academic success, personal and professional development. And so, although online learning and all that stuff wasn't way out there, we were doing it. He'd show up in the room where the students would come to meet, set up the camera, make sure everybody was there, and he says, "Okay, Dr. C, take it away." And we do the same thing I was doing when I was on campus. And one of the things I was telling you about keeping records and stuff, I kept records of all those classes. This represents first year enrollment. See what happened? They stopped signing up. And so I think that last semester there were maybe 2 or 3 students that signed up. I know why, but I don't have time to talk about it. But to demonstrate that something like that could be done and contribute to the success of those students that we can measure in a very definitive way, to me, it's just plain old outstanding. So you get a sense of my sense of accomplishment when I recognize something as fairly simple as this. This is not brain surgery. Well, real fast. I mean, it wasn't, well, it was all hard work, but just to have you know, there was some recognition of the things that were being done. And so I appreciate that very much. So I happen to find those photos where standing with Chancellor Jiske. That's Chancellor Jiske. And standing with him. And then a bunch of outstanding and very fine teachers who made a difference. And I received a note saying, "Collier, can you come and do a photo?" I say, "Of what?" "Of you." "For what?" And so I showed up and says, "Just stand right there." "What's this for?" "Well, we're going to put it in the UMR journal that we do." Right. Oh, okay. Then I get a letter saying, "You've been recognized as, the students say that you are a very fine teacher." One of the other things, entrepreneurship, and I enjoy talking to undergraduate students, and Dr. Barnett's in the room. He played a significant role in helping all of this kind of stuff happen. Start a business, not for profit, so I can keep my day job. And it all stemmed from, maybe the collaboration with Jim Stouffer and Mike Vandermark. They were both in the chemistry department. And we three took responsibility for a coatings technology program in which short courses were offered to the coatings industry. And so throughout the year, we put on these short courses. And so I came to the university with expertise from Dow Chemical, with polymers and application and all those kinds of things. So this was just natural stuff for me. And so we got together and we started, but long story short, it got to the point where, we'd go to conferences, people would send you questions about solving problems, and you'd solve problems, and I was writing trade journal articles and all of those kinds of things. And then it got to the point where, "Hey, Collier, why don't you make a business out of this?" And so the folks over at Missouri Enterprise at the time said, you want to start a business? Because I got plenty of clients for you. I don't know, but it's not a whole lot different than what I do already. And so we worked together and we established the Alliance for Advanced Coatings Research. And for 18 years, I led that effort. The only reason I stopped is because I had to. The state said I could not operate outside the state, and I had moved away from the state. Although they still have me registered as a business. And I submitted the form several times. Not do that, but there's some flying around going on as well in the time this computer. Actually, the 5 of us, the 3 children and Shirley, we'd all trained together. And so you can imagine when we're in the car and headed home after training, how that adrenaline has to wear down before, guys, you got your homework done? so you can get that. But it did give an opportunity to, I Everly Lassiter walk up to me and say, "Aha! I knew it! I knew you had another life." Okay. And so let's try to wrap this up. The interesting thing about closing that business is that there were some assets, significant assets, and the question is what I was going to do with them. And so we decided to fund an endowed scholarship with the priority of awarding scholarships to African American students. That's what we want, and that's the way it was written up. Sad to say, the DEI pushback has led to us deciding not to award scholarships the way we wanted to, because the university, the university system, let me do it that way. The university system has decided not to abide by the wishes of donors that have this kind of request for the scholarships that they've established. And so at this point, Shirley and I decided, well, until you guys come to your senses and figure it out, we're just going to hold on insisting that you award scholarships because you say you cannot do it. I hope my tone doesn't suggest anything, but nonetheless. Here's some cool stuff. I was mentioning to you the Mississippi State University Black pioneers, the first students to attend that institution from 1965, where the first black student enrolled, to 1975, that decade, we decided to reach out to those students and ring your bell and tell your tale. How did you come to Mississippi State? How did you manage to navigate to complete your degree? And what impact did it have on you after graduation? That was the tale that was being recorded and organized. And as I mentioned before, a documentary about that is about to drop. Is what I'm hoping. And the other thing that we're actually working at doing is developing and producing podcasts aimed at helping students be successful. I never in the world imagined that this would present a legal issue. We're figuring it out. But nonetheless, we're working on stuff. Okay. We're gonna wrap up. I say thank you very, very much. More than I could ever imagine for the awesome support of my family. You know, clearly realizing, I'm sitting here talking about the challenges I had. Can you imagine 3 black children in Rolla community, attending Rolla schools, they were in separate grades, and experiencing the kinds of things that pre-college students experience in public schools. So they have their story to tell as well, I'm sure. But because of their support, they are just plain old awesome in my eyes. From left to right, standing, is my son, Yeeman, his wife, Kessie, my grandson, McKeelan, and then my other son, Donovan. And then seated is our daughter, Tan, and her daughter, I said mini me, Kendall is her name, and then of course my beautiful wife, Shirley, enduring so much with me. And then the guy that's trying to make us smile. There's a story behind that, but I won't tell it. and so they have endured, and now we live in the wonderful community of Piperton, Missouri, and continuing to do so. So I should stop right there because that's probably enough. Okay. So switch to the next slide. Thank you. All right. Yeah. Well, with the anticipation that questions and comments could actually contribute to how I explain the quiz question and the take-home assignment. We got good time for that. Well, we have time. Can we make time?
We can make
Chill
time.
there.
If
Chill
if everybody's good to stick around,
Chill there. Time. Okay. I would be very happy to entertain. If you don't mind, if you have questions or comments, I'd like to repeat them so that folks online can hear and appreciate the questions that you're posing. Yes, ma'am.
Without compromising your family,
Yes.
how do you think it is different for your children and your grandchildren now than it was for you? How much progress has there made, or do you feel like there's been progress and you're stepping back?
No. Honestly, no. No. Actually, I think it's getting worse. In current present day stuff going on, it's moving so rapidly back. If I had time to sit and just talk and tell y'all stories that you'll clearly understand what I'm talking about, right? But there's one advantage for them. They are very aware. Very aware. And what it does, it helps them navigate. Plain and simple. It doesn't make our society change and be the way we all would want it to be, perhaps, overnight. But they can manage. Question? Yes, sir.
Given the challenges you faced when you arrived, one would have predicted failure. But you had great success, so make the connection for us. Why, given those extraordinary challenges, were you able to have such success?
Given the challenges, why was it that we turned out to be successful doing what we intended to do? To me, that's a great question, and it isn't an easy one to answer. And then again, it is an easy one to answer. Please try to imagine this with me. Any of you remember what do they call the rhyme tale, not fairy tale?
Aesop's fable.
Well,
Graham's fairy tale.
well, just the idea that Brer Rabbit says, yeah, he's going to be thrown in the briar patch.
Yeah.
Oh, please don't! Not appreciating, of course, that's where he was born,
Right.
right? Which meant he knew his way around the briar patch, right? What does that do for you? What does that do for you when you experience it all your life? And especially the formative years. When Jim Crow was alive and well, which means it's not alive and well now, it is very much. How did you learn to navigate? Like I say, that's another story for me to write, but how'd you do that? And so my answer is there's some deep, deep intuition that is so deep, it's very difficult to explain to people that aren't attuned to the words that are coming out of your mouth. Okay? And so the success comes from learning to focus and pursue what you want, even though you already know you can't do it the way others do it. Do you create your own path? No, not necessarily, because you got to use what you can use. But the fact that you have people in an organization like this one, like my friend Dr. Gregg, I mean, come up, shake your hand, hug you tighter, and say, "Oh, I can't breathe," and then let you go. To have folks in the community that will come and embrace you and says, "Just let me know how I can help." I didn't know you had to endure this kind of stuff. And you hear everything. This, it's it's not necessarily important to say all of the things that you hear, but you hear. Anyway, that's the sense of it, and yeah, it would be a long manuscript if I had to put that up.
Thank you.
Other thoughts? Yes.
Missy Sorrell, who's watching on Facebook.
Hi, Missy.
She says, love Harvest, Shirley, and family. Their time in Rolla meant a lot to me and our family. So she just wanted to let you know she was here.
Missy Sorrell sent a note that they love us, and the time that we spent in Rolla was something that she really appreciated. And so, thank you, Missy. Good to hear from you. Some others, yes.
Did you always know that you were going to go to college? Do you remember being young? And I only ask because both of my parents had college degrees, but when it came time to like enroll, they were never like, hey, you need to do these things so you can go to college and be successful. I had a friend's mother who was like, hey, it's time to take the SAT, you better go do that. She was a teacher. So
The question basically is, did you know always that you were going to go to college? Let's see if I can do it in 30 seconds or so. Recall the community I grew up in. It's a segregated community in the corner of the city during Jim Crow. And so I discovered America in 1954. There's a term that mothers in the South use when you're the small one. I was the knee baby, okay? And she says, we need to go pay a utility bill, so here's a 4-year-old holding the mom's hand and walking all the way to town because we didn't have a car. Get to the building where you pay utility bills, and in front of the building was a water fountain. And I said to my mom, I'm thirsty. I want some water. And she, you know, I'm kind of walking up to it. A tall, thin white man stood up in front of the water fountain and yelled out, the N-word, can't drink water out of that fountain. If you want water, you go around to the side of the building. This is indelible, guys, right? I cried like a baby. Oh, a knee baby. Went around to the side of the building to drink the water. You know those fountains, though, you turn the handle and the water just trickles out. Well, I wasn't thirsty anymore. And all I could do was try to breathe through the sniffles. Okay. And so, how do you learn to navigate, you learn to manage. You learn to manage your own emotions, which is a terrible sacrifice. Because it takes away everything. It takes away your creative ability. It takes away the way you think. The MEP students, and I'm sure my friend Darryl can tell you stories as well, but we sought to help students have more than just a one-dimensional sense of where they are and how to get to where they want to be. I would say to them, guys, before we finish this semester, you're going to understand navigating wherever you are in 5 different dimensions. That's what I tell you. And we spend a lot of time talking about that stuff. And so, how can you do that? You have an intuition, difficult to explain. It has to be, if you says, well, how was that? My question to you would be, how was what? And then offering some clarifying. Then the difficult part is to have you understand what I'm saying to you. Any other questions? Because I'm about to give you a quiz.
We had a couple from on here.
Okay.
Bat said, for context, the national retention rate in 2024 was 68.2%. Thank you, Dr. Collier, for your leadership then, now, and for sharing this important history.
Is that an S&T note or?
Yes.
Yes.
And then we also have from a Robert Barnes Jr.
Oh yeah, it's Colonel Barnes.
Asking if you
Hey,
would
Colonel.
tell them about the one chair rule and about finding community.
One chair rule. Call me, baby. Just the one chair rule. If you can clarify, Robert, do so, please, and I'll be happy to come back. The one chair rule. He'll tell me, oh, that's what you do. Okay. And so, thanks for those questions. That's pretty important. I understand all of this is going to be archived anyway, so there'll be access. Oh, wow, wonderful. You get that chapter written. Okay. Okay, y'all ready? Quiz. All right. Now, I should explain ahead of time that this quiz should only take you 2 seconds to respond to. So don't be nervous. During our discussion, did you become aware of anything that may require you to think about how you engage with your world on a daily basis? There are 3 possible answers to this question. I'm just going to help you out. I'm not going to give you the answer, but I'm just going to tell you what the 3 possible answers are. Yes, no, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Is that logical to you? And so this message I was hoping to deliver was just that. We live in a society that is really complex. But even if you're forced to have to step back and take a broad view, and then realize, how do I impact my environment? Could I do it differently? Should I be doing it differently? How might I do that? That gets to the take-home. Right? Here's your take-home assignment. Like I said, you should have answered this question already, the quiz question. Take-home assignment. Whether your response to the quiz question was yes, no, or maybe, or yes and no, we'll even give you that. I would like for you, because we know this is an effective learning tool, a strategy for learning. Right? I'd like for you to write and explain which response that you choose in the quiz question. If it was yes, if it was no, if it was yes and no, yeah, I want both of those. I want you to write no both of those. If it was maybe, I want you to write that. And why did you choose the answer you chose? Why? Write it. Why? Also describe how your response will have an impact, if any, on how you will engage daily from this moment forward. You talk about your worldview being shaped continuously. Well, y'all know this is the case. I mean, you can have a worldview one day and you listen to something or hear somebody say something else, and if you do it enough, your worldview changes. I want you to write this. How long would it take you to do it? If you listen to what I just said, it could take the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And that would certainly give you a chance to, hey, did I pick that? Did I write that? Did I understand that? Am I practicing that? Am I making a difference? And do I know it? Does anybody ever walk up to you and says, so what do you do? Some of you in the room might remember when we were doing the faculty development stuff, we first started doing it, we asked the question, so if a student comes and takes your course, and you give them a syllabus for the course, when the course is over, what do they walk away with? I remember the first time I asked that question in a faculty development session that we were having. First, there was a lot of quiet in the room. And I started tongue lashing them, kindly. I said, somebody volunteer. What do you want to? Well, I guess. Well, I had requested that when you come to the session, bring a syllabus with you with the course that you prefer to talk about. And so what impact do you have? What impact do y'all have on the society, on your environment, on people, on each other? To me, that's the critical lesson. I won't give you the bottom line, but I'll give you the bottom line. If you don't know this, sense this, understand it, have viewed it, have talked about it, have experienced it, it really isn't that difficult. It really isn't. Please know, it's not that difficult. And actually, you can do some of these things under the most difficult circumstances if you really wanted to. So I probably should stop. Any more questions, comments, thoughts? I am so appreciative of you coming. Dr. Eck, I'm really appreciative of you inviting me. You've done something that you probably never imagined that you'd help me do. I had mentioned at the beginning the hesitancy I had about really doing this. And after doing it, I understand why I had the hesitancy. So I have you to thank. I have you to thank. And I have all of you to thank as well. My hesitancy was due to just that psychological barrier of going back and digging through all of those experiences. And fortunately I should give Mississippi State University credit for training, a scientist and teaching us to be quantitative in what we do. But I took all those notes and kept them and organized them and was able to review. And I said, oh yeah, I remember. Oh, I remember when that guy came to my office and accused me of discrimination, and then slammed the door, walked out, sent him a note. Hey, you accused me of discrimination. I need to stop telling this, right? Tell you what, make an appointment with me. Come and let's sit down and talk. And I'll tell you what discrimination is all about. Seriously. This is serious. And so, y'all help. Y'all help us. You may not see it, but I certainly sense it. Our nation is headed backwards in this regard. Helping people be successful. Not begrudging that. And sometimes all you gotta do is touch it to make a difference. It's wrong. It's just all wrong. Let's stop. Let's stop. Thank you so much.